In this video, I wanted to take a moment to show how easy it is to get started with FactoryTalk Optix and to create a really simple screen and put a few control objects on there to control. So to do that, we're going to use the FactoryIO software, which is a digital twin software tool. That's what we show right here on the screen. I have a tank that I'll be able to kind of control. There's a fill valve and a discharge valve. So I'll be able to control the percentage that these valves are open. And as the water fills in the tank, I'll get a reading on the level meter. And as water is leaving the tank through the discharge valve, I actually will get a flow meter reading as well. Then to make that work, I have my FactoryIO scene tied to an actual Logix controller. So I have Studio 5000 running here. I've got some real simple logic, and I also have some controller tags that I had to create to tie back to the FactoryIO scene. And then actually running this logic is our FactoryTalk Logix Echo emulator for the 5580 ControlLogix CPUs, or the L8 CPUs. So here's my Logix Echo dashboard. I have a couple of chassis created, but this StemFest chassis and then slot 0 is a CPU called Stem CPU, which is the one I'm actually going to be downloaded to. This virtual CPU has an IP address, which is 127.00.1. So everything is already downloaded to the Logix Echo emulator, so the controller is running. And the logic has been created, so everything's good to go on the controller and on this FactoryIO emulation software. Next piece will be to create our FactoryTalk Optix application. So when I first opened up FactoryTalk Optix, I was given a choice between a default project or a project for an optics panel. I chose the default project. So went into the default project. And this is what we get right here. So you get a dashboard, you get the project view here on the left, you get some properties on the right. So anytime I click on something here in the left under the project view, any properties related would open up in the properties window. So there's a few basic steps we need to do when we're first getting started here. One, we're going to connect the communication or configure the communications to the device that we want to get the data from. In this case, we're gonna tie this to a Logix controller. So that's a Rockwell Ethernet IP driver, and basically we're gonna connect it to that and give it the IP address. Second thing we'll do is we need to kind of create our main window and our navigation and our pages. And then the third thing is we'll put the objects on those pages. So let's do the configuration driver first. There's really two ways to do this. We can come here under the project view, find COM drivers, right click and say new, and then here's our list of available drivers that we could choose from. The RA Ethernet IP driver would be the one that we want to go with. Or we could use the wizard. So we'll go with the wizard. No devices available, click a new station. So we have a choice here between COM driver or OPC UA client. We're going to stick with COM driver, and then there's our list of drivers, and we're going to choose our RA for Rockwell Automation Ethernet IP station. Hit next. The route is simply the IP address, and that was 127.0.0.1. I'm using that. That's the loopback IP address that the emulator is using right now. And the last thing I could do here is give it a name. So it picks a default name. I'm just going to call it Logix Echo as the name of the CPU. I could have also called it StemFest, since that's what I called my CPU originally. Basically, this gives me the ability to give it a unique name because I can have more than one device tied to this Ethernet IP Rockwell driver. So I'm going to hit next. Now, it gives me the option here to pull in the tags. So I have two ways to do that. I could do it offline by browsing for the ACD file location. It'll open up the ACD file and pull all the tags out of that project. Or, being that I am connected to an actual real controller, even though it's emulated, I could do it online. So when I do it online, it's reading all the tags live out of the controller, and I can choose controller tags, and that'll choose them all, and hit next, and that will have imported everything successfully. To show that, we can see our COM drivers now has the RA Ethernet IP driver underneath, and now I have Logix Echo. Now I have tags and controller tags, and then there are all the tags that were in my controller, properly imported. So the next thing will be go to the, under UI for user interface, go to the main window, and we'll double click on that. And here's our main window kind of canvas. And again, the properties for main window show over here. So the width is 800, the height is 600. That again was just the default that I chose for this project, but I can change any of these by just hitting the pencil symbol there, and I can type in a new value and hit enter. We're going to go ahead and leave it default. Now, one thing you do with this main window is we can kind of create this, treat this as a bit of a kind of like the base, screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to create panels, and those panels will kind of act as containers that would open up in this space. So what we can do is we can actually create a header up here, and one way to do that is we could just drag an icon image from my desktop right into this space. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Rockwell logo, just you can put any logo up here of course, or any type of header information. Now when I put this in, you can see it's quite large, and again, now that it's highlighted or selected, the properties for this object or this image show up here on the right. So if I scroll down a little bit, we see that our width is set to auto and our height is set to auto. Well, I can basically go ahead and click on that and edit that. I could also, of course, take a corner here and drag it and resize it. Notice when I did that, it put pixel sizes here in the width and height now. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this to 200 by 50 to make it smaller. And I'll put it up here in the upper corner, again, to kind of act as if it was a header. So that's our main window. We'll kind of leave that as is. So if I want to create separate pages or panels that would open up as kind of like a container inside of this space, what we're going to do is we'll do that by coming up here to UI, right-clicking, say New, and we're going to say New Folder. And I'm going to go ahead and just call this Pages to make it more descriptive as to what this folder is all about. And then underneath Pages, I'll right-click, I'll say New, I'll choose Containers, and I'll say Panel. This now creates a panel called Panel 1. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this as well to Pages. Or actually, I'll take off the S and just call it Page. Now, the properties for this page are going to be over here. So notice that it came up with a width of 300 and a height of 300. But this is an 800 by 600 space. Plus I have 50 pixels kind of taken for this upper kind of header area, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and give the width, I'll do 780, and we'll say the height will actually be, let's say it's 500. And we could give it a margin, left and top margin, just to kind of put that in there. So that's kind of our base model for our page, which again will be acting as containers. So what we'll do now is we can right-click here and say New, Page, Pages, and then Page. And now here we got a page 1 created that's already got our base, kind of our template for the pages, right? So we have our model, and this will be our individual page. So I'm going to rename this. I'll call it tank. Last thing to do here is we're going to create the navigation, because we're going to be able to put a navigation structure here to pick if we have multiple pages. So to create that navigation, we'll come back up here to main window. We're going to say new container navigation panel. Now it drops it in here, but we're going to go ahead and fix this sizing. So what we'll do is we're going to stretch it horizontally, and we will stretch it vertically, and then we're going to give it a top margin of 55, and that'll bring it down below our header. And then to tie our pages to this navigation window, we would just simply take our page we created here called tank and drag it right there. So if I had multiple pages, if I went ahead and created a new page, I could just drag it and put it there. Let's come back to tank, and now we're going to finally put some objects on here and tie them to our scene. So what I'm going to do is, being that we have a tank and two control valves, I'm going to first I'm going to put the tank object in here. So to do that, up top we have our template library. So if I choose template library, I can now just type in tank. It'll search for the tank kind of graphics, and I've got a few to pick from. I'm going to just choose this one right here. I'm going to click it and drag it into the onto this page. Now I can kind of resize this if I wanted to, and there are some tools here to help, you know, center it and all as well if I want. But this tank, again, the properties here, we can see that we have some abilities to control the level, the min level, and the max level. Now, back on the factory I/O scene, it is actually scaled from 0 to 10. So I'm going to put my max level at 10, and the min level will stay at 0. Now I can change the fill color. It's blue, which will kind of match what the scene has, so I'm going to leave it at blue. The other thing is the level. So right now it's set to 0, but we do have this kind of dynamic link icon here. So I'm going to choose that dynamic link, and I'm going to tie this to an actual variable that's in the controller. And being that it's a tank level, I'm going to tie it to the level meter. So I'm going to come down here to COM drivers, RA Ethernet IP, Logix Echo, tags, controller tags. And it just so happens that the float in 1 is actually the level meter. So I've just tied the tag in my controller to the animation of this tank, just like that. So I'm going to add 2 more things here real quick just to show, and that's going to be, I'm going to put a slider so that I can control how, you know, what percentage of the fill valve is open, and I'll put a second slider that will control the percentage that the discharge valve is open. So to do that, we're going to come here to tank, and we're going to say new base controls. And under base controls, I have things like label, text box, spin box, button, switch, but I'm going to use a linear gauge. And that puts a linear gauge here on the page. Now, right off, we can see this gauge is scaled from 0 to 100. That control valve in the scene, just like the tank level, is also 0 to 10. So the minimum value is 0, the maximum value is 100. I'm going to change this to 10. So I changed that. I can also take this and I can kind of drag it and resize it a little bit. So the other thing I need to do is I'm going to tie the value of the slider to a tag in the controller. So just like I did before, when I hit this dynamic link, I will come down till I find ConDrivers, Logix Echo, tags, controller tags, and I'm going to tie it to the fill. So that is a tag in the controller that will write the value out to the control valve. One other thing I can do here is I can right click and I'll just say new base controls and a label, and that way I could label this as fill valve. You can put wherever you want. So now I'm going to select this, and I'm going to click both of these. I'm going to right click, I'm going to say copy, and then I'll say paste, and then I will call this discharge valve. And then if I click on this, I'll have the properties. So I already have my 0 to 10 scale properly, but I'm going to change the dynamic link to the discharge and say select. So one other thing I want to do is I'm just going to show, I want to get an actual reading for what is the level in the tank. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and put one more label here. I'm going to add one more base control and a label. And I'll put this label right above the tank. Then to tie this label to an actual tag in the controller, we're going to come down here to text where it says label 3, and we're going to add a dynamic link. And in this case, we're going to go back down to our controllers, ConDrivers, Logix Echo, tags, controller tags, and we're going to choose that float in 1 again, and because that is the level of the tank. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm now going to just show how this works with the emulator. So I'm in emulator mode, which will basically open up an emulator window in Optix. So I'm going to go ahead and get my FactoryIO scene kind of back up here again. And then the emulator is over here, and I just drag it over. So what this will do is I can control this slider to control what percentage this fill valve is open, as well as this slider will control this discharge valve. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up to about 5. You can see that the water started filling right away. You can see we have our tank level indication is showing. So right now we're at 1 out of 10. I can back this off, and you can see that my fill rate will slow down, or I can shut it off altogether. Now it is off. As you can see, there's a little bit of a bounce going on there, but the 2.4, so we can control how many, we can control the number of precision here that we would want as well. Open up the discharge valve. We'll see the tank level will start to fall. 2.1, 2.0. If I were to start filling it again, we'll have a little bit of we'll have some discharge going as well as we're filling. So that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple way to just create some basic animations in FactoryTalk Optix. The one thing I could also show here, if I stop this, I can come back here. If I were to copy this and paste it, I could also show the flow rate. So again, it's selected. So here are the properties. So right now it's tied to float in 1. I could also just change this to float in 0. That is basically be the flow rate that is coming out of that tank. So I'm going to go ahead and start the emulator back up again. Get my FactoryIO scene going here. So here's the emulator. So if I were to show some liquid flowing out, you can see that the flow rate is 2.8. Just when I showed there actually are different numbers. They were both about equal there a minute ago. But we can see that as I change the discharge valve percent, that flow rate value changes. If I were to open the discharge valve full out, you can see our flow rate went up significantly. Notice that when I did that, you can see in the animation, the discharge valve plunger, so to speak, is changing there. So pretty cool. Anyway, so that was a pretty easy, pretty straightforward way to control our scene and to create a simple FactoryTalk Optix application.